amazing that you kept this. I can't believe the old Hornet. Yeah. It was a kit. How did you do that? Wow. I can't remember it at all because I would have sold it.
All right, everyone, what I've got is a whole bunch of stuff. I've taken up the most space on the table. Sorry about that. I have a vintage Tandy Electronics beach ball. Who remembers that? the look of horror on Dick's face over there. And my Radio Shack t-shirt. It's not original, but it's Radio Shack themed. I've got an Intel 8085 system design kit. It actually came, the individual chips actually came in there and you had to assemble the board. So this is an assembled version. I do have mint in box, but didn't bring that one, unfortunately. It's got a schematic even. Who remembers Tom Moffat? Everyone, yeah, everyone remembers Tom Moffat. I've got original Tom Moffat kits. So the Pocket Packet, the Listen in Post, and the WeSat. His original kits. I've got one of my first big published projects in Electronics Australia, February 1993, the digital storage oscilloscope adapter. Did anyone have one? DSI. You never built it, okay, but you bought it, okay. Yeah, Dick Smith and Altronics sold thousands of those, and I sold thousands of copies of software for that. So that gave me my big start. That's what gave me my name. I turned up to a job interview once, and somebody went, "Are you Dave Jones who writes the Electronics Australia articles?" Yep, that's me. So this is before the internet. So that was, you know, that was a real big deal. I've got a Dick Smith Funway book. That's just, there you go, bonus. I've got the update to that, my original kit for the Mark III of this oscilloscope adapter that was published a couple of years later. I've got my 40-channel logic analyzer project that was published in October 96. EEPROM programmer, I didn't design it, but I sold software for it. Thousands and thousands of copies of software to who built their own EEPROM programmer back in the day. Yeah, that was a big deal. I've got, it's hiding. An original 1970s vintage, early 70s, I think, 50-in-1 Tandy kit. So, yeah, that's pretty groovy. And then I've got this is my original one I had when I was a kid. This is the 200-in-1 kit. So that's what I got. I started out with the 50, the 150, then the 200-in-1 kit. So that's it.
The July, so it was a kit, and it came, if you wanted a front-end receiver. It's maybe a little confusing to some people, but it fed into a 4.6 megacycle IF strip. It was a fantastic unit. It was very good for amateur radio use. They used the same dial on the transmitter, which I have now, and I'm working on that project very slowly. The receiver it's gone like round the world. What happened was, when I was a teenager, I acquired it, and I acquired it as a unit. It was already put together, and just to tell you quickly that I didn't have my amateur license at this stage, and it's a receiver, so I was all right. I was all right, and I built transmitters and all kinds of stuff because I worked at Ferris Brothers. I had all the appropriate parts to get at the time, and I had so much fun building everything. So what happened was I left to go to Canada, and I thought I'd be only for a couple of years, and what happened was that the actual unit survived going up to Barara to my mate Grant Barkley, who was VK2AXB at the time, and he said, "I'll look after it for you." But I didn't stay there 2 years in Canada. I was 23 and a half years over there. So when I came back in 1991, I came back in 1990, but in 1991 I decided to go up to Grant's place, and he said, I still have all your bits and pieces that you built. So when I went up there, I retrieved the Geloso front end. I can't believe I've still got it. So I've had it on, but I haven't had it connected up to the IF strip. So I've replaced parts, bits and pieces. So I'm thrilled a bit that I've still got it and it still works. And so thank you very much for understanding my problem with loving Geloso, which Russell has helped me enormously, and so many others. You guys were just great the way you've helped me out with all the bits and pieces. So thanks again. I'll stand by.
So I've brought a few things along. One is a Dick Smith Electronics Enthusiast catalogue from 1981-82. I've brought that along. I've also bought...
He'll win.
I bought the best kit that I've never built. It's a Dick Smith masthead amplifier kit. It's all complete here, but I haven't yet got round to manufacturing it. But maybe next week. I might get some spare time. But one kit I did build is, and I don't recall whether it was a Dick Smith kit or what, but it came out of Electronics Australia in 1979, was a direct reading capacitance meter that I built at the time. And it has proved very useful for the fact that, unlike modern day instruments, got an analogue display on the front of it. So that has proved over the years very, very useful for looking at variable capacitors rather than when you adjust them, rather than waiting for a digital capacitor meter for the display to scroll and then settle. You can just change it and look at the movement. And also, perhaps even more importantly, for some of those small trimmer capacitors, I'm not too sure what happens to them. Maybe they get tin whiskers, but they become intermittent over time. And so with an analog display, you can move the capacitor, vary the capacitor, and look at the analog display, and then you can see where it starts becoming erratic, and then you know that they do have an issue. So it's a very useful kit.
I've got a couple of things that are locally designed, manufactured, and American imports. I'll start here. This kit was designed and developed by Electronics Australia in September '68.
That's a Jim Rowe jobby.
Yep, sure is. It is one of a series of three that came out from Electronics Australia. Now, I was still in high school when this came out, and I think whilst I was in high school, I had a part-time job with kit sets in DY. And I was building their Playmaster 3+3s and 10+10s and various other things. I bought the circuit board, which has got an RCS number on it, and you could tell in those days the size of the print and the ease of construction. So yeah, the board virtually occupies almost the entire body of it. I purchased this at a garage sale, mainly for nostalgia reasons, because I had the board, I never finished it, because by the time I was old enough to afford the parts, they'd stopped making the box and a few other bits. So I got this bit, then when I saw the whole thing, I thought, you beauty, I'll take that home. So yeah, it's early, but there again, it's a Australian design, manufactured. It was pretty swish stuff back then, everything nice metal boxes and well presented. I'm not sure what it would have cost to build then, but whether I could afford to buy the parts from kit sets or Radio Dispatch when we were doing TAFE at Ultimo, where we all used to go, and do it that way. So yeah, that's a nice local one. Now when I was working for one employer in the mid-70s, they had a number of Heathkit products we were using. We had a Heathkit power supply, VTVM, Decade box, various other things. So I took a bit of a shine to Heathkit. Basic, reliable. So when I had the opportunity, I was off doing my chemotherapy stint, I did some eBay time. It kept me sane. I bought a couple of things on eBay, and a couple, I don't know, geez, hundreds. But what I'm getting at with this is that, like most of these kits that we build, and you can see it in the Dick Smith kits and the others, there's always a pretty comprehensive guide. So unpacking, tools, etc., your fancy Heathkit soldering iron, your Exolite screwdrivers.
Oh, they smelled great, didn't
Yeah,
they?
yeah.
Screwdrivers.
And guess what? Not one page of safety. Now, when you go to do anything these days, it's all safety, and the last page is how to build it. So yeah, do not drink the battery acid. So yeah, a builder's guide, other such things, and I have one here in an original box, and it's hasn't been constructed like Tim, one of those weekend projects, but I even got the PayPal receipt. But you can see this is how comprehensive it was. You had a return policy. You ticked the box for the warranty, etc., etc. These are all the good things that I would imagine inspired developers, EA, ETI, kit sets, Dick Smith, etc., to put together good packages for us to build, and they were good, and I think most everything you built worked, and we could do it. So there we have a couple of nice Heathkit products. Shall we say an early girl, and then a later, more refined model of a decade box. Now I've used these a lot. They're great when generating a current source. So that's my little plug on kits. A bit of local and a bit of imported, but yeah, very, very comprehensive for somebody with minimal or basic knowledge how to solder in those days and build some stuff. So that's my stuff. Thanks.
My dad built me a crystal set when I was a kid. He showed me how to check the headphones with using 2 pennies and a piece of damp brown paper between them to make a cell, right? So the headphones weren't working, and to cut a long story short, it was one coil in the right-hand headset, and so I had to break the wire and then very, very carefully unwind this very fine wire, hung it over the back of a chair, and found the break, and then scraped the wires very carefully and twisted them together because I didn't have a soldering iron. And then I reassembled the whole thing and joined it up, and so now the headset was working, and using the cat's whisker I found the live spot on the piece of gelina that was held in the little cup, and I heard music for the first time, and that was a big thrill. I wanted to buy a number 30 valve, and I went to Radio Dispatch. Anyway, I went in there and it was full of older people, and I was just a kid, and they didn't want to serve me, and eventually they sort of got around to it, and they charged me 10 bob for a number 30 valve and almost threw me out of the place. What a thrill when Dick Smith's stores appeared and you could walk in there and be greeted by friendly people, and always helpful, and always got the parts, and if they couldn't, they'd help you to get them. So time moves on. I got into the Playmaster stuff. I was living in a back veranda down at Narrabee, and I couldn't have loudspeakers, but so I built headphone amplifiers, and I had a pair of Akai headphones, a turntable with a ceramic cartridge, and one of the things I heard on the radio was a bloke talking, having a conversation with somebody, and it was very loud, you know, and I thought, yeah, I wonder who this is, and it turned out to be an amateur radio operator. I didn't write his call down at the time, but I determined that that's what I wanted to do, so I went out and I got my licence in 1960, 2 metres. I didn't do the Morse code because I was too busy studying for my degree. gone on from there, and I've built various things. I've built a lot of loudspeakers and radios. I remember building the one set with Magic Eye tuning, and I put it in a very ugly box that I made, and we used that as our radio for years. I built this, so there you go. This one is still in service. Initially there was just the amplifier and one connection for external, which was the turntable, and I've had to add other things, you know, as they become available. They're on the back here, labelled. So I had to rewire them to do that, but I've marked the front, the dial with pencil, but I never got around to inking it in. So that's the story with this amplifier. The stuff that came out of that series, the Playmaster series, was always good and always worth building, and I enjoyed doing it. I love building stuff. I love repairing stuff. What I've got to do is get down to just doing one thing at a time instead of trying to do bloody 25 things at a time. Yeah. So that's about it. Thanks for listening.
Mine's just an off-the-shelf product. So at about 1977 or 78, I forget what it was, I purchased this off-the-shelf 27 meg CB, marketed as the Hornet. SDR Power Medic marketed as a Southern Star. So yeah, it was the 18-channel system, but later on I converted it to 40-channel by changing the switch. Yeah, had a lot of fun with that in the early days. But that's it, nothing terribly exciting.
And I bought that because I was tired of using batteries every time I needed something. And it worked the first go, and I still use it every day today. Well, quite often today. So it's still running after 30 years. I've got a bad story about it, though. I was so proud that I could have any voltage that I wanted. I built a regulator for a handle that I was going to use on a motorcycle. And you know, motorcycle go to 18 volts, 20 volts. And I was testing this to 30 volts, and the whole thing worked very well on the bulb. Then I tested on the radio, it was working very well. But I had all these leads coming out of there with all the different plugs that I need all the time. And then I plugged the radio on it, but I forgot to bring it down to 12 volts. So $175 later, the radio had to go back to Dick Smith, and then I got it fixed. It was a $700 radio. At the time, handheld was so expensive. I'm sure I'm the only one who's done that ever. So that's my story, my radio.
It's March 1987. It's just after the America's Cup in Fremantle, and I'm on the ship in Fremantle. And I walk into town and I found a Dick Smith electronics store. And after looking around, I find this nice little amplifier kit. Now on the ship, we had two FT757s, one driving a 3-element Yagi for HF and a broadband dipole. And above the Yagi was a 4-element quad for 2 meters. Now we had a 2-meter transverter, 10 watts out, not very much power. So this was just a perfect fit to go with that. So I started building it as fast as I could. Didn't get it completed, and then we sailed. Now we went across the Indian Ocean. You try soldering when the ship's rolling 35 degrees each way. It's not recommended. So eventually, I think by the time we got to Tenerife in the Canary Islands, we were in harbour for a little bit of time, and I managed to get it completed. And again, to give context on time, while we were there, the first fleet reenactment came into port. All right, and lucky enough, I got a guided tour around the flagship of the First Fleet, because I happened to know the Commodore of the fleet, which made things a bit easier. Anyway, we sailed from Tenerife, and I got a chance to fire up the amplifier for the first time. So we're about 1,000 kilometres out of Tenerife, turned the beam down back towards Tenerife. S9, 2 metres both ways, no problem at all. Really good signal. We carried on.
Must have been the amplifier, mate.
It was the amplifier. The amplifier, yep. Carried on various ports, and eventually we got up towards the UK. And for those who are into QRA locators, in the North Sea between UK and most of Europe, there's some wet squares, and people like wet squares because not many people manage to operate from there. So I got the ship diverted out into this wet square on 2 meters. We've been announcing for a bit that we were going to have, get in this wet square during the evening. So I had G4AAL logging for me, and I said, I don't think it's going to work with many people. Anyway, I got into the wet square, I called CQ, and bang! So I think in the next hour we worked about 150 stations on 2 meters, all after the wet square. So this is the original kit instructions. They're looking a bit moth-eaten now. And here is a picture of the ship and a QSL card from the ship. So the ship's call sign was GB0 SWR stroke Maritime Mobile. And that amplifier was used live from that ship for the very first time. And you know, I've been using that amplifier on and off for the last 35 odd years. So yeah, it's a good little bit of a history.
So this is a satellite receiver that I designed in about 1984. I don't know if any or many of you know that the Dick Smith organisation expanded into the US, and this product was sold as a kit by Dick Smith USA, and it was headlined by a Radio Electronics magazine that had a circulation of about 2 million at the time. So it was a pretty popular kit. I was pretty lucky that when I worked with Dick, he basically said to me, just go for it. And here are all the kits that we produced during that time, and many of them are amateur kits, including this one. Teletext decoder, HF transceiver, CB Yagis, UHF watt meter, 9-element 2-meter Yagi, teletext decoder, more Yagis, the Dick Smith UHF Explorer transceiver, how to stack Yagis, the VHF transceiver, and in fact in the US there was a 220 meg version of it. 25 watt UHF power amplifier, preamplifiers, power amplifiers, this, watt meters, and a radio direction finder. So I think you could really say that Dick Smith Electronics did more than any other company to promote amateur radio in Australia. And I'd like to thank you for the free hand.
Well, what I brought today is a few things. It's not my original one, unfortunately. Otherwise, these little layouts would all be cut out from the back. But that's how I got started. Again, thank you, Dick. I blame you. I remember my best mate's dad came to Australia. We didn't have Dick Smith. He brought me back Funway kit #1. And yes, I made everything in here, and that's what got me started. I even remember the particle board base you got wasn't drilled, and I still remember drilling out all the holes, hundreds of the bloody things. There's a later version of the same thing that was sold, I got this in the 2000s, with a plastic board that's pre-drilled. And the second person I blame for my career is Colin, and I can't remember his last name. Mitchell, thank you, for talking electronics. The best thing about these is that they always came with a PCB.
On the front cover. Yeah.
On the front cover. That was the hardest part of any kits that you ever saw or found in EA or silicon chip or whatever.
I've got a 5-part video series interviewing him, by the way. It's fascinating. It's on my channel. You should watch it. It's really good.
So that's my talking electronics set. Unfortunately, I lent the set to a mate of mine when I was in high school, and I didn't get the last 2 issues back, which really sucks. But anyway, an almost complete set. These were fantastic. Thank you.
So this is a replica. It's not quite a period piece, unfortunately. I'd love it to be, but it's a replica of what's called the Kim 1, which was the first demo board for a company called Moss Electronics that brought out the 6502 CPU. And the 6502 CPU was used in all the greats. It was the Apple II, the Commodore 64, a bunch of the Ataris. Like literally, there's about 30 PCs there. And Moss was actually started by a bunch of guys that defected from Motorola that were selling CPUs for about $150, $175 at the time. And they went, we're going to start our own one. We're going to sell them for $20. And here's a copy of the original ad from September 1975 where they say, yep, you can buy our one, which is pin compatible with the Motorola one for $20, or we've got this other one for $25 that's got an internal clock generator. And they said if you get clocks for less than $5, buy the 6501 and give your purchasing agent a bonus. So a month after that came out, and this was the demo board to use it as a ready-made system, or you could just buy the chip by itself. Motorola dropped their price from $150 to $30. So it really kick-started the start of the... so it kick-started the computer revolution, and at that trade show, I believe, was a young Steve Wozniak that bought a pair of them that he used in his Apples.
They had them in the jar, didn't they?
They had them in a jar. The top half of the jar was the legit ones, and the bottom half was non-working factory seconds, but they didn't let people know that because they wanted them to think they had a full supply. And the really amazing thing is they weren't allowed to sell at the trade show. They thought they would be able to, and then it turned out that they had some rule against selling at Westcon. So they had to direct people to their hotel room and then yep, no worries, and then take the cash there, and then you could use a photocopier and copy the documentation yourself. So it was like this incredibly dodgy but incredibly open thing where you could get it. But because this little board allowed you to do everything, it's got a hexadecimal keypad, it's got the 7-segment display there, it allows you to save and load tape, which is the game changer for home systems, because it meant you could get the magazines and all of the people sharing code and stuff between themselves. This is horse racing game built in. And so that's the birth of a whole bunch of the computing magazines, and the start of the computer culture was really because of this one piece of hardware. And I found this one. This is the Dungeons & Dragons dice simulator for the KIM 1. And it describes how the kid got Dungeons & Dragons game in 1980 and was missing the dice. So his dad programmed a dice simulator on it. So I've actually typed in all this code, and if you come up and you push the 4 button, it'll roll a D20 for you. So I just rolled a 4. So, yeah. But yeah, and I've got all the documentation here if anyone wants to have a look. It's a really fascinating bit of hardware.
All right, I'm going to have to go backwards in time as I go because it's quite sort of complicated and involved. But in the late 90s, I worked for an advertising agency called Creative Innovations. One of our clients was 2UE, which happened to be near the Gore Hill shop, I remember. And they did a lot of Dick Smith ads, radio commercials, TV scripts, and I've got a few TV scripts here. They wanted someone to write a kind of a different TV script, radio script, for different feel, and I had to research this, and I came up, this is for these 5.1 amplifier systems. So they gave me the challenge to come up with a radio commercial, and I had to find an actor. So I had an idea in my head. Okay, I'm going to look for gumshoe actor, like a Mike Hammer with that sort of how you doing sort of thing, and came up with a commercial for it. And I'll play if you want to hear it. Do you want to hear it? Yeah. Yeah? It's very different from the other ads.
Next door, don't call the police. They're probably coming from the new Technics Digital Pro Logic home theater system from Dick Smith Electronics. For $699, you too can connect one to your stereo TV or stereo VCR for real cinema sound. You get 5 surround speakers, AM/FM receiver, and at almost $200 off, it's a real killing. Or there's the new JBL system with remote control for $795. See Dick Smith Electronics today for a real blast in home cinema entertainment. And pick up the new July brochure while you're there.
It was a challenge because it was only like 30 seconds. I had to squeeze all the text in. So I was basically a copywriter for there. So I don't know how many of those things they sold, but I was told it was okay. But at the time, my brother found out I did a Dick Smith ad, and he gave me this, which is a beautiful VHF 2-meter radio, which was given to him by an amateur who was trying to get my brother into amateur radio. So my brother wasn't interested, and he gave it to me, and it sat on the shelf until I got my license, which was about 14 years ago. So I didn't have a radio when I got my license, so I tried this out, and it didn't work. So it turned out there were a few dry capacitors in it. I replaced that. And then only a few weeks later, I went to a Trash and Treasure and then found this, another Dick Smith product, Spectrum Analyzer, VHF UHF, which you plug into your Crow, and you find a standard frequency, and you can do some alignment on the radio. So this is really good. I was quite impressed. People saying, oh, it's not very accurate and all that sort of stuff. But I found it was quite accurate and very, very easy to use. So, and I managed to get the manual for it as well, which is good. But this I didn't have anything, so it took a little while to source all the material. Assembly manual, there's even for the power supply. What else? Lots and lots of information, circuit boards, all that sort of stuff. And
What was the name of the radio?
sorry, Dick Smith Commander.
Commander.
Yeah.
There was a whole lot of kids called an Explorer.
Yeah, Explorer and Commander.
We call them exploders.
That's right. That's what you called it. That's because sometimes you think you're going to put the resistors in there, and it turns out to be the capacitor going, so you get them around the wrong way. You go pop. And I managed to find the original magazines that talk about those as well. So, going further back in time, and excuse me if I'm talking too much, when I was at school, in the school holidays, I managed to get a few weeks work experience working in the Dick Smith art department at North Ryde. I didn't do a lot, but it was a lot of fun, and I managed to do all on my own and design all on my own a packaging product. So this I was looking at this and thinking, oh, this is the death knell of the phone book, because it's a phone dialer, automatic phone dialer, and I believe that was actually used. The artist actually created packaging based on this design, and so it actually was for sale using my box design. So that was pretty good. But I'm going back further now, because my brother, who's much older than me, he managed to get work experience at Dick Smith in Artarmon, just as they were moving to North Ryde, going all the way back. And he said there were people like David Foster, yes, Ross Tester, yes, Michael Middleton, yes, all these wonderful people in the art department. And because they were moving, they're getting rid of a lot of stuff, including old ads. So they're for example...
Ross Tester was a member here for many years ago.
Was he? Yeah. Okay.
He's still around.
Yeah.
He's still alive, as far as I know.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was writing, it inspired me to do engineering and tech writing after looking at all this stuff and then doing those designs, because I thought it was much more interesting than just doing copywriting. But here's like they do, in the art department, it's all primitive. There's no computers, nothing. Although they did have photo typesetters, and they had little cleared font discs that you put them in, they spin around, and it spits out a cartridge which has a bromide in it. So after getting a rough detail that's approved, right, then you assemble the ad, and you use a bromide camera. The artist would draw these wonderful radios, and this is a piece of original art from Dick Smith Electronics art department. It's even got the approvals on the back of it. So it's got everything. And somebody wrote non-walk bands, free digital display.
Electronics property?
But he said they were being thrown out. He said they were being thrown out because it must have been, you also got to read a lot of rubbish when you go to North Ryde, but anyway. So this is an absolute treasure to keep. Well, it always got thrown out when I moved house. So concepts were drawn. So this is like a concept of a CB radio that the artist did, like there. And then a proper one would be done. Let's see, I've got an original art of an early frequency counter, which I think Michael Middleton would have done that. Yeah, my brother said it was really, really good. Now this is like momentous. This is the original art for the move from Artarmon to North Ryde. Oh, wow. And it's got you dressed as Superman.
Oh. That was my normal clothing in those days.
Super Dick. But you see all the artwork is like...
You've got a dickhead there, I know.
Yes, I've got a dickhead.
Look at that. Show that.
So there's a bromide of a dickhead, and you get different sizes for different sized ads.
I've got a story on the dickhead. When it was being sold, when all the rights were being sold to Kogan, they were put up for auction, I actually bid on the rights to the dick head and the website, but Kogan beat me out, so
That's rotten. But anyway, because these things are all cut and paste, no computers or anything, when you do a final bromide, which is smooth, which is a smooth bromide, and you've got to paint it out. So I've got an example here. This is a copy of a final bromide before it's painted out. So the artist would have to sit on their big drawing boards, and I don't know if you can see, because the bromide camera causes shadows around chunks that have been cut and pasted in. So the artist would have to sit down with white paint and laboriously go through everything. They go through all the shadows and paint it all out before it's sent off to the printers. Now when it's sent to the printers, photo etching plates. Oh, by the way, there's a Dick Smith postcard.
Oh, wow, that's rare.
Yeah, Dick Smith postcard. Try and keep it still. So these are original, this is for a Christmas ad. Original photo etching. These would have been thrown out.
And they're in reverse, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all reversed.
wow.
So they're amazing things. Now I'm getting close to talking about the story because that's interesting too. In the art department there were lots of antics. I can only find one example here. But somebody modified a catalogue cover and made Dick look very, very old. But you've still got your hair. There was all kinds of things. There was one with I don't know if you remember a catalogue cover where a woman's being handed a cup of coffee. Someone cut out part of your face and it was sort of there on the woman's. So, which brings me to my tale, which I swear on my oath, you can put me on a polygraph. It is absolutely true. This is what my brother did, what he told me, and he luckily escaped trouble. There was a lovely lady working in the art department, he said, who created the yellow store tickets. So you write the product on there, put the cat number in, send it to the shop, and they look at the cat number. They wouldn't even read the thing. They just look at the cat number, match it to the item, and stick it there next to the item. Okay, she would get a scroll list of this is what you're going to write, what you're going to write, and he modified one of them. So she has these beautiful ink prints. Some of the nibs are quite big, so you can make large lettering and all that sort of stuff on these yellow tickets. And it was beautiful handwriting, and she was as innocent as pie. So my brother modified a thing for an antenna rotator because they were quite popular then, because I think back then a lot of amateurs used the Armstrong method and all of that. So it went to the store and it was there for about a week before somebody picked it up. So the original advertisement on the ticket said, "Tired hand, try our new antenna rotator." My brother put on, "Tired hand, try our mechanical wanker." And there was a whole hullabaloo. Apparently David Foster was called into your office. I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember the incident?
David Foster, marketing manager, Kerry Bigger, the art director.
Yeah. So, and my brother, everyone in the art room was stood up, and well, I think you or David Foster were saying, "Who did this? I want you to own up." And Ross Tester, his face was like really purple. He looked really, really angry, he said. So nobody fessed up. My brother, of course, wasn't going to fess up. He didn't want to get kicked out of another week of work experience. So, nobody knew who did it until now.
Fantastic participation tonight. It's been wonderful. So much nostalgia, so much memorabilia, so many memories, and so much history. A lot of you have spoken about how you came into electronics radio as a career and as a hobby. I have to say I did work for Dick Smith once. I didn't get asked back. That was in New Zealand. Actually, let's start with the special guest. Dick, if you would like to come forward and... Sorry, you're standing right beside me. would you like to tell us who your favourite exhibitors?
For me to make a decision of my favourite object, first of all, I was going to give my vote to David Jones and the Tandy. Get your photographs now. Look at this. I'm never going to do this again. The only reason I'm holding it now is that Tandy don't exist anymore, and Dick Smith still does. And also Sean's wonderful signal generator. What really appealed to me there is the fact that it's a kit designed by the famous Jim Rowe, or as he's called there in the magazine, Jamison Rowe. And I was just talking, Jim Rowe is alive and kicking. He must be well in his 80s now. I've got some really old radio and hobbies magazines, and there on the editorial page is Jim Rowe. So he's been around forever. Not many people realise that we managed to grab him away from Fairfax, and he came and worked for us at North Ryde for quite a few years, and was one of the reasons I've always said Dick Smith Electronics was successful because I surrounded myself with capable people, and Jim Rowe was one of them. So I greatly appealed to the signal generator designed by Jim Rowe, but I have to give my prize to, and I put it down here, I also like the Hornet 18 channel. People mightn't realise that I came up with the idea of 18 channels in Australia and managed to convince Tony Staley, who was the Minister for Communications at the time, that we should go to 18 channels, and there was a good business reason for it. At the time, everyone was importing American 23-channel CB radios, even the local hairdresser was selling them. So I came up with the idea we should have 18 channels, which meant we had to design a special model. And we designed them in Japan and got them made, and so that meant we had less competition, but don't tell anyone that. To me, the one I'm going to give my prize is the 2-metre amplifier, because of the wonderful, I've been into, as well as electronics, into adventure, and to me the wonderful story of Operation Rally, is that what it was? And
yeah,
Operation Rally, sailing around the world and then using that 2-metre amplifier to transmit and use ham radio in other places of the world. So that's where my prize goes. Thank you.
Hey. Dave, your turn.
Yep, pleasure.
All right, I was going to give it to Gary. Where is he?
Gary Cratt?
There is Gary Cratt. Yeah, it was until Carmen came along, and I'm sorry, but when you bring actual original, like, print-in plates for the Dick Smith, this was like a kit theme, you know, and Dick Smith Tandy theme, when you bring original plates and all the original drawings and the stuff that you actually drew, the story was absolutely fantastic, bang on. So you're my pick.
And she told the world about her brother.
Yes, exactly. So fantastic. But Gary, of course, for designing all those kits, that was just, you know, that was just absolutely incredible. So, yep, well done. But so is there a runner-up prize? I don't know. Anyway, Carmel gets my vote.
Well done. Congratulations. Dave, it's been an absolute privilege to have you both here.